Hello, welcome back. When I left off on the background of Negro spirituals, the colonists were creating a country with a new identity and economy that benefited vastly from slavery. For the purpose of this video, I wanted to focus a little west in the French colonies of New France and Louisiana. In 1600, the French established their first seasonal trading post, establishing several settlements over the next decade. Moving further south and west, the French settlements in North America stretch from northeast Canada to Louisiana. The French relations with the natives were largely peaceful compared to the British and the Spanish. They learned the native languages, consumed their food, and slightly embraced their culture. They named the places that they passed through after indigenous languages, such as Kanata, the Iroquois word for village, which became Canada. The French treatment of the natives led many tribes from the land now being claimed by the British to seek refuge there, and as I detailed in a previous video, many runaway slaves would go to Indian territory seeking refuge. So migration into Louisiana wasn't uncommon for freedom seekers, especially since it was sparsely, if at all, populated by whites. The French treatment of the natives was vastly different in North America than it was in the Caribbean. Sugar plantation sugar plantations in Haiti, then Saint Dominique, Guadeloupe, Saint Vincent, Tobago, and other French-held islands were brutal. Slaves faced grueling work, inhumane, inhumane working conditions, regularly having limbs amputated, and died within a few years of arrival. This constant need to import new slaves would ultimately lead to the French being extremely outnumbered, which would prove problematic in the future. While the efforts on the Sugar Islands in the Caribbean were a success, its North American colony was quite the opposite. By 1750, it only had a population of roughly 70,000, and its settlements were really just trading posts for furs and other goods from Native Americans. The French had no real plans to settle the area. It was cold, heavily forested, and many of the men that arrived from France came from prestige and were not willing to rough it out on the frontier. An estimated two out of every three Frenchmen went back to France after their first Canadian winter. The fact that the fact that the French were not very interested in settling is what made the encounters with the natives regularly peaceful. The British, however, were interested in settling the area, particularly for its vast land supplemented by many rivers, lakes, and valleys. The land, as you may have guessed, was to be used for slavery. The British colonies wanted the British colonists wanted to grow the empire, but also to enrich themselves personally. For this For them, this meant gaining more land and using it to grow cash crops. The British only inhabited the 13 colonies and had a population of over 1 million people. New France and Louisiana, as I stated earlier, only had a population of roughly 70,000 French, spread across a land area at least 5 times greater than the 13 colonies. On May 28, 1754, Lieutenant Colonel George Washington attacked a French fort, setting in motion a chain of events that will lead to the Seven Years' War. Without going too much into detail, the Seven Years' War ultimately ended with France's defeat and its forfeiture of its North American settlements, with the exception of some sugar producing islands in the Caribbean, notably Saint Dominique. But their loss in the Seven Years' War ultimately set in place a chain of events that will lead to the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and what's most important to this series, the founding of the states of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. In my next video, I will detail the aforementioned events and explain how every form of music relates. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.